As editor-in-chief of Package Design magazine, I speak with some of the most brilliant thought leaders in the design, branding, and marketing of consumer packaged goods. Through the generous support of our sponsors, we bring these experiences to you. This video series explores what inspires these thought leaders and their insights on the collaborative design process as a strategic business competence. I'm Linda Casey, and this is Package Design Matters. Today we're at IIT's Graduate School of Design, and we've been invited by David Jaggi, who's adjunct professor here, and he also happens to be the Global Director of Strategic Initiatives at Wrigley in his spare time. And we're so curious, what got you interested in becoming a professor and teaching the next generation of designers and innovators?
One of my friends and I sat down, we put together a class, we started thinking about where are the gaps, right? Where are the gaps in education today that we see in industry? You know, the students come out of the universities today really well educated, they're really smart, undergraduate and graduate, and many of them hit the ground running really fast. They can deliver into the businesses in a very short period of time. But how to navigate the space once they're inside the company is a little bit of a challenge. The nuances that you need to understand in order to create an idea and get it through the mechanism is different. And what we saw was there's plenty of programs out there that teach for the entrepreneur. They teach about startups. They teach about, you want to be the guy who comes up with this great idea. You want to be the next Steve Jobs, right? But most of us work in big companies. We don't work in little companies. We don't work in people with 10, we're not working out of our basements, hopefully, right? Because the success rate's pretty low, right? And we all have to pay our bills. So what we thought was, how do we started a curriculum more for entrepreneurs. How do you develop this idea? And then we moved to something that was a little bit more meaningful for big business. We took a step back and we said, majority of the people graduating from any of these schools is going to end up at a large company, right? Like a Wrigley, like a Mars, like a Pepsi, a Coke, whatever. They're not going to end up in a startup.
The consumer world was once static. We then came to understand the role of a brand. In turn, the world has changed. With the foundation of observations, insights, strategy, collaboration, and extraordinary ideas, design serves as the conduit for a brand. Without design, what purposes do these efforts serve?
While most of us hope that we're not working out of our basement, some of us are called to that, and are called to that kind of entrepreneur, startup type of occupational calling. They want to work for themselves. So how has your role at IIT and how has IIT helped the students who wanted to create their own businesses?
Yeah, that's a great question. And IIT, as part of the iPro program, has enabled that for the students. It's the only program that I'm aware of in the nation that actually has a really positive / beneficial kind of agreement with the students. So if they come up with an idea that's patentable, for example, at most universities, the university owns the information. And it's a little bit of a challenge to get that out of the university and start your own, whatever it is, business. Historically, IIT has enabled students to go off on their own. And so as part of this iPro initiative, I know at least 2 different groups of students have decided they want to take what they developed and start a company. And they've been able to leverage people like myself and a very, very broad range of industry people, from attorneys and to getting legal advice, to get technical advice, to get manufacturing advice. All of these types of skills are out there and support systems out there to help them grow the business. Some of them succeed, some of them don't, right? I mean, very few startups actually make it, but the opportunities are out there for those people that want to do that.
And having the support system of professionals who have some real world experience really does help their odds and helps them, be one of those rare startups that actually become a success story that we all love to hear.
Yeah, and actually what I've seen, so I was part of one of the startups. It was a great ride. It did not work out. But the two partners that founded the company both have moved on beyond, I think, their wildest dreams. One of them does own their own business right now. Actually, I think he owns 2 businesses, and he's not even 30 yet. The other one works for a large company. But the experiences that they gained both at IIT, through the iPro, and then on to starting their own business was just invaluable in terms of accelerating their career. And the networking that they did with the mentors that they had and kind of the people that they could engage with was just incredible for them.
And that's something that I notice with the generation that's coming up, that they're so much more aware and savvy when it comes to the networking part of it than, say, my generation was. We definitely felt that networking was maybe taking a shortcut, which and then we realized many, many years later that's how business is done.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody puts it in these terms, but I think that the personal brand that the younger generation has is very consciously developed. There's a young lady in the town I live in who decided when she was a teenager that she wanted to be a fashion blogger. And before she hit 15, she was one of the #1 fashion bloggers out there, just a passion. And she spent all of her free time crafting her personal brand. Right, what she stood for, what she wanted to do, how she wanted to be represented, how she was seen in the social media. We don't think that way. Right? Social media came around after we were already, in business and whatnot. We play there, but we're not quite savvy the way the younger generation is in that context, and they do a great job with it.
And it's one of the things that's really satisfying when you're mentoring, because it's, they always say that sometimes the teachers learn more than the students.
Yeah, that's great. So I find it phenomenally rewarding. I love being surrounded by younger teams of people. They see things through different eyes. They have a different perspective on life. When we think about design, we think about how you approach design, how you approach solving problems. Sure, they're green in some areas and they've got lots to learn, but how great is it for people like myself and yourself to be surrounded by people that are really smart, really passionate about what they do, and don't think about the world and don't see the world through the same lens we see it through.
We live in a fast-changing digital world. Dynamic communication and social expression influence just about everything we do. Business is digital. Impact is instant. Brands and customers interact in amazing new ways. From postage stamps to packaging and billboards, HP's Graphic Solutions business is leading these transformations, creating innovative digital print technologies that enable more effective, engaging communication between brands and end users.
While some of them are really smart and really knowledgeable and passionate about what they do, they haven't gotten that breadth of experience yet. And so to take their ideas and make them real, they need a little bit of coaching. They need to get a broader perspective. I'm not sure if it's political savviness, business acumen, but something along those lines to help them understand that they may have the best idea in the world, but if nobody else really cares about it, it's not going to go anywhere. So when you think about the iPro stuff, it's a great idea. You can't turn a business into it if nobody wants to buy it.
And definitely, you've been able to even encourage students to take some quick and dirty ways to prove out the concept of an idea, the marketability.
Yeah, so one of the things that we include in our class that we teach here is something called a minimum viable product. And if you think about it, any idea, you can take any idea and develop it through a launchable offering, whether that be a service or a physical product, or even a website, for example. But if you're a startup, you have to understand what are the minimum things that you need to learn to decide whether the idea is worth moving forward. Right? If you're a big company, you may have plenty of money. You can put together this very large research project. You can map out a 2-year plan to market and trudge through it. And it works sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. Depends upon what your success rate is. But if you're a small company, you sometimes need to learn this really fast and inexpensively. And so I'll give you an example. One of my students had this great idea to have a music soundtrack to a city. So we're here in Chicago, and he said, what if you could walk through the city with your earbuds in, and as you navigated through the city, your phone would know where you are, GPS, right? It would know which corner you're on, and you could curate your own soundtrack to the city. Or maybe better yet, you like a particular DJ or a particular singer, artist. That artist or that DJ could craft their own soundtrack to the city. And instead of you navigating your own music, through the city, you could listen to somebody else's. What if you had a competition where you could have a competition within the city and who could have the best one, who could get the best votes? It was this fantastic idea a couple years ago. Nobody had thought about anything like that yet. And we said, well, he had no idea what to do with it. Right? And we asked them the question again, well, why would anybody care? Do you know if anybody, how are you going to figure out if anybody cares about this idea? And so it turns out he lived by the L, by the train station. And so on a Saturday morning, he got up and put his stereo system out on his balcony and a big flat screen TV and put a text message up there, a big message to the people on the L. And he said, hey, if you want to hear a song, text it to this number. And lo and behold, over the course of the morning, lots of people were texting him songs to play. It didn't cost them anything. Half of them probably had earbuds and iPods and music players that they could listen to, but they were happy to have him play it through through his stereo system. So check, he got past the minimum type of understanding. Right? Then he could then take it on further to understand, well, do people care about curation? Do they want to do it themselves? Do they want to turn it into a game? Do you want to gamify this? But until he got past the first little component of does anybody really care, it may or may not have been worthwhile moving past that point.
Definitely. And it also works the other way because maybe, as you mentioned before, the all had, iPods or iPhones and or smartphones on their persons, and someone might have shut down the idea saying there's no market for this, and being able to prove the market was just amazing, and being able to bring something new.
And highly rewarding for him. He thought it was fantastic. Never thought about it. He brought it to life right away for very little money. He didn't have to develop the whole infrastructure because it wasn't about creating the device. And I think about it, it's really complex to go and figure out how do you geotag music around a city. What kind of infrastructure do you need? How do you reach out to people on their cell phones? How do you connect? You have to have a service of some sort. It gets kind of complex, for a student body person of one to do. But he's found some information without creating the whole infrastructure either.
And what I think is interesting about this idea too is that, and this opportunity for you as an instructor, is that it's so different from the CPG world that a lot of us live in as far as thinking of brand experience as product. Brand experience can be so many things. Maybe it's just a song.
It could be, but I think getting back to CPG world, I think the same principles apply, right? We spend a lot of time potentially overcomplicating things, but at the end of the day, can we strip it back? I always like to ask my team, can we strip it back to the bare essentials? What is it that we think we want to learn? What is it that we need to understand? What's the experience we want to deliver, right? Because there's usually a nugget in there that's kind of a showstopper. If you can't do this, then it doesn't work. If you can't hit a certain price point, I mean, it's simple as that, right? That's not an experience, but you need to be in this price window. That puts a constraint on it.
And I wonder how much of that thinking comes from your engineering background.
Who's to say? Yeah, I've had a pretty varied experience thus far, right? I've started out on the engineering side. I've spent time in sales. I've been on the design agency side. I've been in the CPG world. I tend to think a little bit methodically, so I'm constantly challenged to say, what are we trying to solve? Right? What's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the answer we're looking for? That doesn't mean I'm not open to divergence from there. The goal is not to get to that question, right? The goal is to at least understand a structure around where you want to go. Pure design, white space thinking, blue sky thinking, even that has a structure around it. So I think my technical background helps me in that area. The creative side and the creative people I'm surrounded with help me in kind of pushing back a little bit and being open to the happy accident or the diversions that take us a little bit further away from it.
Something is happening. The familiar barcode is touching everything. Every surface, every sound, every image. Imperceptible to you, yet it's clear to sensors like your smartphone. All things have become their own channels. This is the engine driving the Internet of Things. This is Digimarc.
Something that a lot of design leaders struggle with is how do we think about results? How do we think in a more methodical way, more like the business leaders who are, in our CEO positions? How do we think more like them?
Yeah. I think one of the, you just picked up on something really great there that, again, is kind of a little bit of a passion of mine, which is around innovation and business strategy, right? Innovation is great. It's an overused term. It can mean anything from a couple % productivity or efficiency improvement to brand new to the world, life-changing ideas. At the end of the day, none of it matters unless you can make it real, unless you can bring it to the consumer, unless you can connect the brand with the idea and launch it, right? It has to fit in a bigger context within a business strategy, right? And so even a small innovation is super important if it's the right thing to do for the business strategy. A big innovation is the same way, but it has to fit within the context of what you're trying to achieve. And so I think having an understanding of what the business strategy is from an innovator and a design perspective, packaging, product, or otherwise, is one of the keys to unlocking success. You need to be able to understand what the goal is from a business perspective. Do you want to grow the business? Are you talking about an incremental, small change to what you're doing today? Or you want to do a small pack renovation because your artwork or something is getting a little bit dated looking? Or do you want to turn the world upside down and create something totally new and get out of your own space? They're both great places to be. And if you know where you want to be and what you want to do, you can be much more successful at it. You can create a strategy around how you want to get there.
And how do we make that design process that design and innovation process more repeatable?
Yeah, that's a good idea, good question, right? Because the process should be repeatable, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same, which is kind of a conundrum for certain people, right? So designers are very comfortable with ambiguity. They pick a lot of tools, they have a lot of tools to choose from, and they're going to try and pick the tool that's right for them. In organizations that are not design-centric, design-led cultures, it's a little bit of a challenge for people that haven't been through the process to navigate through it. They want a checklist. You do this, and it's a very stage gate-driven world. We like to know that in gate number 1 you do this, in gate number 2 you do this, et cetera, et cetera. And every time it's a repeatable process, right? Mm-hmm. There's ways to keep that process repeatable, but change what happens within each one of the steps, right? And so I think as designers, our strength is about telling stories. Our strength is about translating insights and ideas into something that's actionable, that's something that's a product that's desirable, that's sellable, et cetera. We're a bunch of problem solvers, right? I think it starts with defining the problem. Like, what is the problem that you want to solve? And it's not about we need to grow the business by 10%, right? That's easy. Everybody wants to grow the business. But what is the specific, if you have a package there, where is the package failing? Are you trying to get something into a car, a consumable that's in a car, and your package doesn't fit in the car cup holder, or it doesn't fit in somebody's purse? They're not going to take it with them into the car. They're not going to eat, or it's too sloppy, right? That's the problem to solve. You'll end up generating money from solving the problem, not looking at it through trying to generate cash or generate growth. I think designers are great at bringing things to life, showing them visually, right? So it's our job to bring things to life, not only for the external consumers, but also for our internal constituents. We have the obligation to tell the story internally and externally and bring this to life at multiple levels, so that during this stage gate process, we bring our partners along for the journey. Designers don't exist, or packaging designers or designers, even engineers, we don't exist alone. In order to launch something, you need to have a very cross-functional team. And if you want a design-centric, design-led organization, you need to bring all of those people up front, right? You need to have this interesting balance between desirability and the business needs and the brand needs. So how much money, knowing up front, for example, how much capital do you have? Do you have any capital? If you don't have any capital, what kind of assets do you get to work with? How much flexibility do you have from a branding perspective? Are there distinctive assets that you have to apply in very specific ways that are going to constrain what your package looks like? What are our financial models? Is this something that you're willing to take at a profitability hit to get into a new space on? If you upfront all of these and you bring all of the relevant constituents, the finance team, the marketing team, your teams that interface with the external agencies from collecting data and whatnot, bring all them together and start bringing them along on the journey, crafting the story for them, I think you end up with a higher probability for success. Haven't really addressed the repeatable nature of it, but everybody starts to come along for the journey, and they start to see the value that something like design can add to the process, a process that tends to be fairly dry and more check the box, check the box, check the box. But we have to understand that most of the other departments don't speak the language of design, right? And designers don't speak their language either. So I think one of the things that we all can learn is how do we speak each other's languages a little bit better. And to be fair, the onus is going to be on the new guy on the block. If you're an established company, maybe like a P&G, who's got a very strong design-led ethos, probably everybody's on the same page from a language point of view. If you're like a majority of the other companies that think design is great and that's going to help you, you need to start having some crucial conversations and try to make sure that we're putting things in the vocabulary that everybody else is going to understand. And I think defining the problem, figuring out how to bring people on the journey, speaking the right language. And I'm not sure what that is. That's different for everybody, right? I mean, it's going to be a different language whether you're talking to somebody from finance or you're talking to somebody from marketing, but they both have their own vernacular, and you need to speak to them in their right language. And all together, everybody needs to be speaking so that they can communicate in a really meaningful way. And I think those are some keys to successful iterations within bringing something to life.
And as a mentor, how do you help your students feel comfortable speaking the languages of the other departments that they perhaps the finance department, the business department, the other departments where they're not native in? How do you help them speak their non-native language? Yeah,
that's great. So I'll give you two examples, one from school, one from work. Okay. So from a student perspective here at ID, for example, our students have a very big background. Some of them have worked in business for a while because they're all master's students. Some of them haven't. It's a little bit more of a challenge because they don't live it in their day-to-day life. They're students. They live the language and the way a student lives, right? Yes. So one of the things we tried to do in our class a couple years ago is bring in investors. So at the time it was about entrepreneurial design. Mm-hmm. And it's the same game, right? If you're going to come up with an idea and you want somebody to invest in your company, there's a pitch. The pitch can't be in student language. The pitch has to be in the language of the entrepreneur that's going to give you the money. Mm-hmm. You have to understand whether you're speaking to a venture capitalist, you're talking to mom and dad, sister and brother, cousins, private equity. They all speak a slightly different language, and you need to understand what they're going to be looking for. And so in the class, we would actually kind of guide them through the things that they would need to address and talk about. And then we bring in investors, real world people that had a lot of money that, some of them wanted to invest money in these kids' endeavors. It didn't really happen, but they would. It was a great experience. Mm-hmm. In the corporate world, it's a little bit more concrete, right? So last week I was in a meeting with a couple of associates who were presenting to me, sharing with me something that had been asked for. A nice PowerPoint deck, 20, 30 pages. And I said, well, what are you trying to do here? It's a great deck. It's got all kinds of great personas, and it built the whole story around design. Mm-hmm. And it talked about trade-offs between different aspects and components of the design and why they were relevant. And I said, okay, who are you going to talk? Who's this for? I love it. It's awesome. Yeah. But we need to make sure that if you're going to show it to, a senior executive VP who's in charge of commercial, we need to tone down a few things because he's not going to understand any of this. If you're going to talk to finance, it's something else. If you're going to talk to the marketing team, well, maybe we're perfect. So I was able to, in real time, walk through that as an example and bring them up to speed, so to speak. And it's not always easy. You never get it the first time, and I'm still learning every day, where I'm fumbling when I'm speaking with different departments and whatnot. So it's the fun of it is it's an ever learning process, right?
Each department has their own language, they have their own goals, and they have their own budgets. And I think that's what we have to think about is if there's some concrete things that that they're accountable for as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, so that's why I like the idea of figuring out what the problem is in the beginning, right? And so everything that you just said is really valid. And any of those little components can be showstoppers. Somebody doesn't want to spend some budget on their component of it because they don't see the value in the project. If you can front end a lot of the conversations with all these people, so I'm a big advocate of bringing all the parties together on day one. Figure out what the problem is, align on the problem to be solved, align on what you want to achieve, align on what success looks like, align on what you think is in scope and out of scope, and what you're not sure. You don't have to solve all the problems then, but align on the very important things. Get buy-in from the different departments. You have a higher probability for success if everybody up front is aligned. The other thing is respecting their time, right? So when you're in the consumer desirability component of a process very early on, you still need to know that you can make money at it, right? You can't create something that doesn't fit within the parameters of the problem. But you might not need that finance person there every day. So think about how you incorporate or include them during the journey, on the journey. How can they build onto what you're already doing? Get them to contribute, right? Everybody likes to contribute. Everybody likes to have some skin in the game. And skin in the game works both ways, right? You want somebody to have skin in the game because that commits them, but at the same time, they like to feel like they're contributing, they're building. I love it. I mean, if I'm invited to the table, I'm going to give you my opinion. Most people are, and you feel good when some components, even some little nugget of what you've done, made something better. And so I know collaboration is kind of an overused term, and at the end of the day, collaboration doesn't mean everybody has to be everywhere doing the same thing all the time. That's just kind of inefficient.
But sometimes that collaborative process also leads to project scope creep. How do you control that project scope creep and with the thinking that you want to make sure that things keep moving at a nice, quick pace?
It's okay to move off target if it gets you to a meaningful place, because some of the fundamental assumptions that you've made in the beginning may not be true. If you're lucky, a good number of them will be true. But when you start talking with consumers and meeting with them, you have to have a hypothesis in the beginning of what your idea is. So you go out, you talk to consumers, and you go, wasn't really 100% on target there, and we thought we were going down this path, and we're not too far off, but we're not. Or you may be completely wrong. In which case, take a step back, take a deep breath, and rescope. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as, again, it's about being specific and intentional with what you're doing, right? It gets back to the measurable, it gets back to the structure. If you continue down a path without course correcting your goals, then you rapidly get down a trail that you can't recover from. Budget gets out of whack, timelines get missed, and nobody's talking about it. But if you realize that the scope has changed, you can take a sit back and go, wait a minute, okay, look, it's going to cost us this much, or it's going to save us this much. We can pull the timeline in, or we have to push the timeline out. It's going to change the ability to grow or not grow the business. All of these things come into play, but you have to have that conversation.
A trend that we're seeing across brands, whether they're CPG or not, is the build out of innovation-specific roles and departments. And I wanted to get your take, as you have this wonderful perspective as an educator, as a business professional. What's your take on these innovation-specific roles and departments?
Yeah, so I think innovation-specific roles, departments, it's an interesting topic. I have some suspicions, right? I've only worked in a few companies, have taught for a while now. So whatever I know is kind of from that experience and what I've seen, I think that there's some real value in having these roles, depending upon what your culture is, depending upon what your corporate culture is. When I first started learning about them, when I first started interacting with them, probably was more when I was on the consulting side of things. And there would be these people that were the innovation managers. I'm like, what's an innovation manager do? It kind of boggled the mind. Being on the creative side, being on the agency side, where that's what we lived, this process, right? But I soon came to learn that there's companies that have design thinking or design thinking approach or design ethos within their company. I assume like a P&G. Again, I've not worked for P&G, but I'm assuming what that environment is like, where they probably don't need those roles because everybody is an innovation champion. Everybody is a design champion. They understand their role. They understand how it all comes together. They understand how to play nice. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's hard work. And I'm sure there's healthy tensions. But an innovation manager in a company that doesn't have that understanding probably does a lot of work to keep the teams together. They're a little bit like the glue that holds everything together. They need to be a little bit of jack of all trades. We talked about communication. I think they need to be able to communicate across the different disciplines in a very healthy way. They need to understand, have a very broad knowledge base. And I think, again, to a company that's just converting over to a design-centric type thinking, it's invaluable to have those people to help craft the story, to bring the key people on board, to make sure that things are moving along and that there's none of these hands from the grave where everybody's smiling and looking nice, and at the end of the day the project dies because somebody's got didn't understand what was going on, right? I mean, there's all kinds of issues that can pop up, but even if it's just something simply not understanding it, which is normal. So I think that as a company matures into kind of a design-centric company, they probably have less of a need for one.
And as I'm thinking about different cultures and design and innovation, one thing that is very unusual about your background is you have a very international background, and looking at the design and innovation world from this lens, this international lens, what opportunities and challenges are there for companies that need to innovate across borders?
Yeah, that's super exciting. Working across borders presents all kinds of crazy opportunities, not the least of which is scale. If you want to be big, what better way than to go broad? But it does present a lot of challenges. The challenges that I see, the big ones being are cultural. How do you interpret what you're seeing? Interestingly, I don't see, there's a lot of commonality. We're all human beings, right? So at the end of the day, there's certain common denominators that we all live by, subscribe to. We have to eat, we drink. There is seemingly a growing global trend towards healthier, more sustainable food type products. It seems, as I read things, that everybody gets it. I mean, India is having a horrible time right now with pollution. We only hear about China mostly, right, about the pollution in Shanghai or Beijing or whatever. But Mumbai has some of the worst pollution in the world for the same type of reasons. It's the cars, it's the gas, it's the fuel. So they're paying attention to, what's going on at that level. We think we're doing it here. It's at a different level. It's the same thing. So at the end of the day, we all have kind of similar desires. So I think from a scale perspective, going global is great. How you translate what you're hearing is a fun challenge. I mean, there's language barriers, right? That's the easy part, actually. It's culturally, what do some things mean different things here in the US than they do in China, than they do in India, than they do in Australia. Lots of times we think, oh, Australia, England, US, we all speak the same language, but it is a radically different culture.
Yes. Definitely. Radically different culture as far as understanding for consumer insights, radically different culture as far as understanding what, a business team, as far as what's appropriate and correct as far as being able to do course correction, discussing what type, bringing people to the table, I imagine is different in different cultures.
Yeah, it's something that fascinates me. But yeah, there's certain things that you can say in America, for example, that you would not want to say in Japan or China or, Australia. Just a simple word can throw an entire conversation off. And a word that in the United States doesn't mean anything bad, you say it in the wrong context somewhere else, and you get these blank stares and, what did I just say, And how long does that carry over, right? So we tend to be a very kind of new culture here. We tend to let things slide, I think, pretty easily.
Yes.
If you're offended by somebody and it seems to be superficial, you brush it off and you move on, and that's not true everywhere else. You make the wrong communication message, you send the wrong message to somebody, and it can last a while, and it takes a while to get credibility back and to be part of the conversation. So those are some big challenges.
So how you divide your time and your energy is perhaps a little bit different depending on which culture you're working with. Maybe the time and energy you spent in communicating an idea is much more in a culture that you don't know very well.
Yeah, I wish I could say I had more time to actually do it, because I think I could be that much more impactful. But yeah, I said, where you spend your time and how you spend it. And being sensitive to how things are received and being sensitive to how things are being communicated. Spending a little extra time thinking about that and digging in, right? There's websites out there and studies out there and documentation out there about how societies are different and how they communicate better. Anybody who works in an international basis, I think would be great for them to get some of that training. And I can tell you right away, I don't have enough of it. It's an area that I wish I had more time to spend looking into it, and then ultimately I'd be a better partner with my counterparts around the globe.
And it's such a symptom of our worldwide culture of having, being information rich, but really time poor.
In the office environment, time's a big one. Everybody's time crunched. Nobody has enough time. And I think, I wish I had a good answer for that one. I just don't.
It's something we're all working on.
Yeah, we're all struggling. Every day we all have more work to do, more places to be, working across multiple time zones, right? Australia's 14 hours ahead, working till crazy hours in the morning and night to keep everybody connected. So I think that's a pressure that I'd love to figure out at some point in the future, how to manage the time better. And how to get 20 hours out of a day instead of just 20 working hours, right?
Well, you've been able to have a very full life, though. You teach, you have a wonderful career, you're very successful. I mean, a global head of strategic initiatives. Hello, that's kind of an impressive title. You've also lived this very rich life. You're an athlete. You're a father to a very successful daughter. So, you probably have some tips. Can you share some tips that you've learned about how to manage your time better? What do you do to be able to accomplish so much in so little time?
Remember when to turn it off, right? And I'll speak personally. One of my challenges is when do I turn it off? I work crazy hours. I work at a global company, right? And I'm talking all the time to people. There is family time, right? Figure out what's important to you, and try and have a balance. For me, family is really important. Career is what I spend a lot of time at, but family is important, so I can't let, finding the balance between them has always been a struggle for me. But as long as I know where my kind of North Star is, I think it's a little bit easier to figure out the balance of time. And it doesn't always work. You go on a business trip, you got to go on a business trip. You're gone for a couple weeks. Yes. But that doesn't mean when you come home you have to work 20-hour days or 16-hour days. You can back it off a little bit, hopefully. Spend a little bit more quality time with the kids and the family, so to speak.
And what one accomplishment within your career are you the most proud of?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of an ongoing one. Very early on in my career, I wanted to have an impact, and a positive impact, right? There's a lot of people that have had impacts that aren't so positive depending upon your perspective. I want to do something good for society, right? And that's no more complex than that, right? Some people are very specific about what they want to do. For me, it's about contributing in a positive way. I like to believe through some of the work I did in the medical world, both working directly for a medical company and working in the consulting world, that I've contributed to that. Now I have the opportunity, I'm working in a fantastic CPG company, to make a difference. So I think that I've done some of that. I'm happy with what I've done. Your career path takes you on the journey that it takes you on. You can't really orchestrate it. You can help navigate it. And I hope that moving forward, I have the opportunity to have a bigger impact. I think part of having an impact with the younger generation and mentoring and playing role model is part of that, right? But it's, how do I take it to the next level? How do we talk about sustainability? How do we grow a business that's sustainable? How do we be more responsible citizens of the planet, right? And that's a big, lofty thing to speak about, and has all kinds of mixed messages with it. But if you can just contribute one little bit to that, it's something.
Well, and you've been keeping your eye on some things, specifically in the package design world, that can help the world be a better place.
Yeah, we consume a lot of packages. So, working for a big company, like Wrigley, like Pepsi, like Coke, like P&G, I mean, if you can have a small change to a package that reduces usage of natural resources or reuses them, we all make so many things that any small change has massive impact, positive impact. So it's a great place to be.
What could the industry do to help you and ID in your collective mission to create a more innovative, creative, and collaborative world?
Yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction, right? I think there's lots of talk about design. There's high levels of recruitment at the universities. There's high levels of co-oping programs. I see, ID has co-ops out there. Cincinnati, the University of Cincinnati has a fantastic co-op program for designers. Northwestern, just up here in Evanston, they have co-ops for a lot of their students as well. So they're getting the students into the industry, and there's a lot of cross-pollination going on. I think it helps. It helps the conversation, and it helps move things along. So I think the commitment both ways, universities and institutions to corporate and vice versa, and kind of contributing your own little piece is a big help.